Hi again, guys. So on today's lesson, I just want to do some direct comparing and contrasting of different cell types with you. I know this is review, so I know you've seen it in biology, you're seeing it in the module, but it bears repeating. The more and more you hear this, the easier it is. Students always struggle with this stuff, and so it's a good idea to just keep reviewing it and keep reviewing it. So we're going to start by comparing prokaryotes and eukaryotes. And I've got a picture of each posted here for you. So we've got the eukaryote over here and a prokaryote here. The eukaryotic cell that you're seeing is an animal cell. We'll get into plant versus animal in just a few minutes. But what I like about this picture is it shows them side by side. What I don't like about this picture is that it's not good at showing you the size difference between these two cell types. Prokaryotic cells have no nucleus and no membrane-bound organelles. Because they lack all this stuff inside of them, they actually tend to be really super small, so small that they can get inside of eukaryotic cells and cause infections in eukaryotic cells. What you will see in a prokaryotic cell that you'll also see in a eukaryote is a membrane. You'll see ribosomes. You'll also see DNA in both, although in the prokaryote, you'll see plasmids in the nucleoid region, which is where the DNA hangs out. Here in the eukaryote, you'll see the DNA in the nucleus, right here. But otherwise, those are things that they have in common. Of course, they both have cytoplasm. You will also see a cell wall in most prokaryotes. The problem here is that the cell wall is not analogous to the cell wall that you'd see in a eukaryotic cell that has a cell wall. Plant cells, and we'll talk about this in another lesson, but plant cells have a cell wall that's primarily made of cellulose. Here you've got, in prokaryotes, you've got cell walls made of other things other than cellulose. So the structure of a prokaryotic cell wall is very different from that of your common eukaryotic cell walls. So that's another difference. So the eukaryotes have the nucleus and have the membrane-bound organelles, which means they're going to be bigger. Okay? Now, let's switch and look at what exactly are membrane-bound organelles, because you're hearing that. Let's talk about what it means to be a membrane-bound organelle. All right, so what we've got here, oops, let me try to shrink myself. Oops, not going to work. Okay, well, what we've got here is a list of organelles that are bound by one membrane. So they're made of one membrane and one membrane only. The first of these, and probably the one you most often think of, is the nucleus. So here's the nucleus right over here. I've included a picture for you. The nucleus is a single membrane, it's made of the same membrane that the cell membrane is made of. And it's got a region in the center, which we call the nucleolus, and we'll get into what that does in another lesson here. But the nucleus is where the DNA hangs out in the eukaryotic cell, and again, all of these are membrane-bound, so you're only going to see them in eukaryotic cells. Another one that's made of a single membrane that's folded and folded around is the ER, or the endoplasmic reticulum. And endoplasmic reticulum comes in two forms. One form is known as the smooth ER, which is what's done in blue in this diagram, and what that means is you have no ribosomes on the endoplasmic reticulum. The rough ER is the part of the endoplasmic reticulum that's dotted with all these little ribosomes, so you can kind of see these little ribosomes all over it, and that's why it's called rough. So smooth ER is typically responsible for processing and synthesizing lipids, fats, things like that. The rough ER actually processes and synthesizes proteins because the ribosomes that are on the rough ER make the proteins, and then the rough ER modifies them, does any processing that they need. Another membrane-bound organelle is the Golgi apparatus. So once all those membranes and lipids are made at the endoplasmic reticulum, the Golgi apparatus packages those, and when it packages them in these little organelles called vesicles. Now, there are some specialized vesicles, and my picture's kind of cutting them off. I had peroxisomes and lysosomes listed there for you. Those are specialized vesicles that are responsible for digestion, and again, we'll talk about those in another lesson. But then some vesicles are just packages of fat or packages of protein that came through the Golgi apparatus. So all of these are single membrane organelles, meaning they are they're enclosed by a single membrane that's folded or circular. Okay, now the next category is the double membrane organelles. These are organelles that have an outside membrane, but then inside there's either a folded up membrane or little discs of membrane. So the first of these is the mitochondria, and that's that guy right there. All right, the mitochondria, you can see, has this outer membrane, and it's listed here and labeled for you. And then inside is this folded up, I'm trying to draw kind of what it looks like, inner membrane, and that's why it's called a double membrane organelle. So you've got two membranes inside, one kind of smooth outer membrane, and then kind of a big foldy-uppy membrane on the inside. And of course, this is the organelle that's responsible for generating the cell's energy in the form of ATP. Then you've got the chloroplast. And the chloroplast is a plant-only organelle that is responsible for photosynthesis, so it's going to contain chlorophyll. Okay, so chloroplast is the organelle, chlorophyll is the pigment inside, and in a chloroplast, instead of one big foldy membrane, what you have are these little discs of membrane. So these membranes are folded into little discs, and they're stacked on top of each other inside of a chloroplast. And sometimes the discs stretch between stacks of discs, so you get a structure that looks like what you're seeing here. So that's a chloroplast. So these are double membrane organelles. They have more than one membrane. All right, and finally, just to wrap up our cell lesson here, let's make a quick comparison then of plant cells and animal cells. Now these are eukaryotic cells, right? So these are going to be roughly the same size as one another. They're going to have all those membrane-bound organelles that we've talked about. So you're going to see a nucleus. Here's a nucleus. There's a nucleus, right? But what you're going to see in plant cells is a few things that are different. For example, you're going to see the chloroplast. And remember, the chloroplast has chlorophyll. Oops, there we go. Animal cells don't have that. Animal cells actually have very few organelles that plant cells don't. There's really only one organelle that you're going to find in an animal cell that you're not going to find in a plant cell. And in fact, this diagram doesn't have an example of it that I can see. Oh, wait a minute. Yep, centrioles. Okay, so centrioles are these things right here, and they're normally only present during cell division. If you remember from biology, mitosis is the process by which eukaryotic cells will divide. Centrioles kind of help pull apart chromosomes during mitosis, and they work with the spindle fibers in animal cells. Plant cells don't have centrioles, they're just going to have the spindle fibers that are pulling apart the chromosomes. Both are going to have all or other organelles, so all others. Okay, all other organelles. Oh, one thing I forgot, the plant cell has a cell wall too, right? Okay, so plant cells have chloroplast, chlorophyll, and a cell wall. Animal cells just have the centrioles. Both are going to share all the other organelles. That means plant cells have a membrane and they have a cell wall. Something interesting, though, that's kind of you need to note here is both plant cells and animals have a vacuole. And in the plant cell, you can see the vacuole. It's kind of this very large organelle. Let me find a good image of the vacuole here. Yeah, that's it right here. I'll kind of outline it for you. There's the vacuole in the plant cell. In plant cells, you have a very large vacuole. Animal cells have vacuoles too. They just do a lot less storage. Here's the animal cell vacuole right here. It's a lot tinier in animal cells. Now, if you think about it, there's a good reason why plant cells have these organelles that animal cells don't. If you think of it this way, plant cells have this cell wall, and you'll notice that plant cells, if you compare the two pictures that you're seeing, plant cells have this very boxy, regular shape, right? And that's because the cell wall is present, and it's holding it into that shape. Animal cells can be all different kinds of shapes, so it depends on what the cell's function is, what shape it's going to take on. The other thing, though, that plant cells have then is that really large central vacuole. And if you think about it, the vacuole can kind of act like a water balloon inside of the cell. So if you think about a balloon that you have in your hands and you start to put water in it, it starts to get really firm, and it expands and gets firm, and that's what the vacuole does inside of a plant cell. So this vacuole expands and helps the cell to fill up that boxy shape that you have from the cell wall. Now, why is this super important? Well, because plants don't have a skeleton. Animals do. Animals don't need this kind of scaffolding, this kind of support. Every plant cell, though, does, because plants don't have that skeleton. So the cell wall holds up each plant cell into that shape. And then the vacuole kind of helps the cell, when it's nice and full and puffy, it holds that cell upright to make sure it doesn't droop. And you can see this because when a plant goes into water stress, what does it do? It droops over, flips over, tips over. So you can kind of see why that's an important organelle as well. So plants have those things. Of course, the plants also have the chloroplast because of chlorophyll. So hopefully that helped a little bit. I know it's review, but it's always worth repeating.